Hey guys, Mark here. I hope you're doing well. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make a colorful conquistador braid paracord bracelet using type 1 paracord. Here you can see the bracelet up close. It is comfortable, it is colorful, and in effect, it is a result of an earlier project which I did. This is a paracord belt using pretty much the same technique. I adapted this technique in order to make a colorful conquistador braid paracord bracelet. Now a bit of warning first. The bracelet requires patience, it requires attention to detail, and it requires some time to do. The reward though is a nice looking bracelet that you can be proud of. Now you may be wondering if you can use 550 paracord for this project. Basically yes, but I would recommend using type 1 paracord since it is a lot easier to join. In type 1 paracord, you can melt two ends together and expect them to hold together reasonably well. 550 paracord is usually joined using a stronger technique, for example the many method. Now the many method requires a sharp lacing needle to do, plus you need to learn how to do it. So I highly recommend using type 1 paracord over 550 paracord. So with this said, we can finally begin making our bracelet. First, we're going to take a look at the supplies, then how to braid the bracelet, and finally how to finish it off. Let's get started. The first supply for making this bracelet is going to be type 1 paracord. We're going to use several different colors, in my case 3. You can just as easily use 4, 5, 6, or even just 2. It doesn't really matter. Now, we're going to cut our strands directly off of a spool or hang. This way, we're going to avoid any wasted cord. I recommend that each of your strands when you cut it is about 2 feet and 2 inches long. This should be enough to easily tie your bracelet. So at the start you can cut several lengths of each of the colors, and then as we go along you cut the additional ones directly off of a spool or hang just to avoid any waste. We really don't know how many strands we're going to need since it depends on many factors. The most important thing is that you cut a sufficient length. My recommendation, 2 feet 2 inches. The next supply is going to be a bracelet buckle. This one needs to be about 3/8 of an inch wide. You can find these in hardware stores or online. I recommend using a lacing needle in order to make your conquistador braid a lot easier to tie. A pair of scissors or a knife is going to be used to cut your cord with, and a lighter is going to help us melt the ends of our paracord. With these supplies ready, we can begin. After cutting our strands, we're going to melt the ends. Attach a lacing needle onto one of the ends. After attaching our lacing needle onto one end of our cord, we're going to take the other end and attach it onto our buckle. First off, I'm going to travel up and through this buckle part or opening. Then I'm going to wrap around several times to make my loops. For this buckle size, usually what I do is make 4 loops. So 4 wraparounds. So like this, 4 wraparounds. Take your short end and feed it through your loops like this. Then secure this end by tightening up the loops. So pull on the long end, and this is going to tighten up the loops. You may need to do some manual tightening as well. Usually what I do is I pull in my short end a bit further in under the loops, then work out the slack out into the working end. Like this. So the short end is now secured neatly under our 4 loops. We can now begin our conquistador braid. We are now going to start our conquistador braid. We're going to take the working end and we're going to work it through the 4 loops that we have set up earlier. We're going to start with the bottom one, then travel through the second one from the bottom, then the third, then the fourth one. So we start with the first loop, travel through it, top down, and make sure that your working end travels behind the loop, then tighten up. Just before we tighten up, you can again see that the working end is behind the loop. This is the case every time that we are moving up through the loops. Tighten up. Then do the second loop exactly the same way. Travel through it. Make sure that your working end is behind the loop. So here again, you can see that the working end is behind the loop, then tighten up. Then we're going to do the third loop, again move through it. Make sure that your working end is behind the loop, then tighten up. Like this. And then the last of the loops. Travel through it. Make sure that your working end is behind the loop, then tighten up. At this point, we have reached the top of the bracelet. We are now going to change direction, going from the top towards the bottom. This time, we start at the top loop, we travel through it, so through the loop, and this time we make sure that our working end is in front of the loop. So like this. You can easily see that my working hand is traveling over the loop, then tighten up. Take your working hand and do the third loop now, traveling top down, and making sure that your working hand is again in front of the loop. Tighten up, travel through the second loop, make sure that the working hand is in front of the loop, tighten up. And the first loop, go through it, make sure that your working hand is in front of the loop, tighten up. Now we're going to repeat the first sequence again. Take your working hand and we're going to travel through the first loop, top down, and again, when we're traveling up, we make sure that our working hand is behind the loop. Tighten up, then travel through the second loop, make sure that your working hand is behind the loop, tighten up. Then the third loop, again make sure that you travel behind the loop using your working hand, tighten up, and we are already at the top with our final loop. Make sure that the working hand travels behind the loop, tighten up. Now we again change direction, starting at the top, traveling through the loop, make sure that your working hand is in front of the loop, tighten up, then the third loop, go through it, make sure that the working hand is in front of the loop, tighten up. Then through the second loop, again, working hand is at the front and tighten up. And the last of the loops, so the first one, we go through it, again, the working hand is at the front and tighten up. And we're going to continue this until we almost run out of cord. So just keep traveling up, down, until you have only a little bit of cord remaining. Then we're going to add in a new color. But for now, we begin traveling up. So again, the working hand is going to be behind the loop. And then, when we reach the top again, move down, this time making sure that the working hand is in front of the loop. At this point, I have only a little bit of my cord remaining. What I'm going to do is add in one more loop, traveling from the bottom up. So this is going to be the final loop with this color, and as you can see, I barely have enough cord remaining to do it. So again, this loop, since it travels from the bottom up, has its working hand at the back of the loop. Tighten it up. Now, we're going to add in another color. At this point, we want to cut our first cord and melt in a new color. The goal here is to have a seamless transition between our colors. To do this, I usually cut quite close to my bracelet. So something like this. Cut. Take a new strand and we're going to melt them together. Now, if you're using a traditional lighter, such as this one here, the way to melt the two ends is to hold them in one hand, melt them, then bring them together. In my opinion, it is a bit easier if you have a freestanding source of heat, for example a Zippo lighter. Basically, this allows you to hold each end in one hand, melt the two, then bring them together. A candle will also work instead of a Zippo lighter if you don't have one. Again, what you do is you melt the two ends, then bring them together. Now let's do it in practice. Let's join the two ends so that we can continue making our bracelet. First, melt them, bring them together, and once they cool a little bit, roll them between your fingers. You need to do it just at the right time, so that you don't burn yourself and so that the joint section is quite strong. After joining in the second color of cord to the first one, this is what you should have. So, your second cord is joined to the first one quite close to our first braided section. Now, what we're going to do is continue exactly the same way as we used to make the first section. So we're going to travel up, down, and so on. Now, if you remember, we have already used up the first loop with our first cord. We're now going to move on to the second loop, traveling through it, making sure that our working hand is behind the loop, then tighten up. Then the third loop. Again, the working end is behind the loop, tighten up. And the final loop here at the top. I'm going to travel through it. Make sure that my working end is behind the loop and tighten up. Now, as you can see, I'm doing my braid very tightly. This is a personal preference and you can do it much more loosely. Making it looser is going to be a lot easier, but well, in my opinion, a tight conquistador braid looks a lot better. Now at this point we continue going through our 4 loops, this time going down. So we start at the top loop. This time our working end is in front of the loop. Tighten up. The second loop from the top, so the third one. Again, the working end is in front of the loop. Then tighten up. And the second loop. Like this. And you can see that my second cord covers over the joint section and hides it out of sight. Finally, we need to go through the very first loop which we have made using our first cord. Again, my working end is in front of the loop. Tighten up. And then we simply continue going up, down, and so on. After completing the second section, what we're going to do is again add in one more loop going towards the top. So this one has the working end behind the loop. Tighten it up. Then again, we're going to melt in another strand. So cut your second cord like this. And now we're going to join these two. And the third color, for example, is again worked just like the second one. So we have already used up the first loop with our second cord, so we're going to start with the second loop, going through it, and since we're traveling up, we want the working end at the back of the loop. Again, tighten up. Then do the third loop. Again, the working end is behind. Tighten up. And the last loop, so the fourth one. Like this. Again, the working end is behind. Then we begin traveling down, so we start at the top loop. This time, our working end is at the front of our loop. Tighten up. Then the third loop. The second loop, where the joint section is. And this is going to hide it out of sight. Then do the final loop at the bottom. Like this. And you can see that we have hidden the joint section quite well. After alternating my cords and colors a little bit, I'm going to get a length for my bracelet which is sufficient for my wrist. At this point, I'm going to take one end of my buckle, unclip it, and place it at the end of my bracelet. We now need to attach this buckle end and the end of our bracelet. As you can see, I have also left a bit of cord in my working end, which I can now use to attach my bracelet and my buckle. Now we're going to use pretty much the same technique that we used to construct our bracelet. What we're going to do is first travel through our buckle, like this, so bottom up, then travel through the first loop at the bottom, and again, my working end is at the back of the loop, just like every time that we pass from the bottom towards the top. Then tighten up, like this. Then pass through your buckle again. Like this. Through your loop. Again, my working end is behind the loop. Tighten up. Travel through your buckle. Then through the third loop. Again, my working end is behind the loop. Tighten up. And through my buckle for a final time. And through my top loop for a final time. Like this. Now all we do is travel through our loops like this. And with this we have attached our bracelet onto the buckle. After tying the bracelet, we need to do a few final touches. Now the only one that is really vital is to trim off the end. Before I do it, I first tighten up my loops. And this tightening is going to hold our working hand much better. At this point you can trim off the end. I'm now going to slightly melt the end. Like this. And this is the only vital part that you need to do. Now what I do is take my lighter and just go over my braid a little bit, just in order to burn off any fuzzy bits. Finally, what you can do, and this is really optional, is to take a plank and slightly rub on top of your braid in order to flatten it out a bit. And with this, our bracelet is complete. So guys, at this point we came to the end of this video. I hope that you were able to create this bracelet without too much of an issue. It takes quite a bit of patience and you need to learn how to do it well. Especially how to hide the joint sections, as well as how to do a consistent braid. But after that, you have the ability to create some nice looking bracelets. Guys, thank you very much for joining me and I hope to see you next time.